But if you want more of like, send her up, please. Okay, ready? Okay. Hi, I'm Erica from the Pancake Princess, and welcome to my new New York kitchen. It's been a while since I filmed a video, but I recently moved from Houston to New York, and I haven't had a videographer to do these videos. But luckily for me, my best videographers, Michael and Brian, flew up this weekend to help capture the 5-year anniversary of the Bake Off. So the first Bake Off I ever did is on my blog. It was a chocolate chip cookie Bake Off. This was supposed to be the chocolate chip cookie Bake Off 2.0. But then it turned into the brown butter chocolate chip cookie Bake Off, which honestly, I think like the best chocolate chip cookie is always gonna be brown butter. So we have 9 popular internet recipes here. Really excited to dive in, taste them, and tell you about each one. This first recipe is by Buttermilk by Sam. This is her brown butter egg yolk chocolate chip cookie recipe. She has a bunch of different ones, but this one is special because she uses a 3-to-1 ratio of brown sugar to white sugar, all egg yolks. This is the only recipe to only use egg yolks and no whole eggs. And then she also uses a tablespoon of yogurt in the recipe, which I assume is to add back moisture from the moisture that gets evaporated off once you brown butter. And she also uses a 1-to-1 mixture of dark chocolate to milk chocolate. I love how thin and like melt in your mouth this cookie is. It has a really nice like chew around the edge, and it's like very tender. It's not quite gooey in the center, but you get a lot of goo from the chocolate. The flavor is really good. I personally am more of a dark chocolate person, but you get a lot of sweetness from the milk chocolate. Despite the higher ratio of brown sugar to white sugar, I feel like it doesn't feel as caramelized, but overall like amazing texture, very melt in your mouth, airy, and good balance of like light, crisp, a little bit chewy. This cookie is by the very popular Claire Saffitz. It's very similar to other popular recipes like Serious Eats, Bending by Babish, Pinch of Yum, but there's a slight tweak, which is why I chose Claire's recipe, and that's she uses 2 tablespoons of heavy cream in this recipe, and that's to add back in some moisture and fat from the moisture that evaporates off when you brown the butter. She also uses chopped fèves, or I just used a chopped Trader Joe's Pound Plus bar, half milk chocolate, half dark chocolate, just like Buttermilk by Sam, and that leads to these nice pools of chocolate on top. So in contrast to Buttermilk by Sam's, which had a little bit of like a bend and like a little bit of a snap around the edge, Claire's feels very chewy. Like you can tell from the way it just kind of like separates that it's gonna be super chewy in the center. So love the chew in the center, very crisp exterior. This one tasted so buttery, and like you can really taste like the caramelized brown butter flavors. I think the mix of milk and dark chocolate is a nice balance between the two. Overall, love the flavor and texture of this cookie. I personally like my cookies a little bit thicker normally, but I mean, the chewiness of this just like can't be beat. This cookie is by Buttermilk Pantry, and this cookie was really interesting because it uses miso instead of salt. It uses milk powder, so when you're browning the butter, you add the milk powder so that there's even more brown butter solid, which is a trick that I think I saw on Chef Steps. It has a much higher ratio of brown sugar to white sugar, and it uses all dark chopped chocolate. Okay, in contrast to Claire, I feel like this cookie has like much more of a fudgy break instead of like a chewy, bendy break. I don't really taste a lot of the miso in there, and that could be because there's flaky salt on top, which kind of blows out, I think it blows out your taste buds a little bit, and so it does taste like salt and not just like miso, but I get like a tiny, tiny bit of like funk from the miso, which I think if you have like more attuned taste buds or you're really looking for it, you can taste. In terms of like the caramelization, I was really hoping that like the extra milk solids would add like a big burst of like caramelized flavor, and I'm not really getting that, but I think it's because the chocolate is kind of like overpowering that flavor. But overall, like a very good cookie. I would say leans a little like fudgier, but like definitely crisp on the edges versus Claire's, which is very chewy, and then Buttermilk by Sam, which is like kind of like airy, crisp, crunchy on the edges. This recipe is by Ambitious Kitchen. It is super popular, highly requested by you guys. It is very similar to my favorite recipe from the last Bake Off, which was Joy the Baker. In the last Bake Off, we actually tested 2 brown butter cookies, Joy the Baker and Cooks Illustrated, both of which took top honors. But this cookie mainly differs from Joy the Baker in that it uses a tablespoon of Greek yogurt, which Monique says is used to create a crinkly top on the cookie as well as activate the baking soda. Like Joy the Baker, it also uses 1 egg and 1 egg yolk for that extra richness and moisture. This cookie actually reminds me a lot of the Joy the Baker cookie, and that has kind of like a juicy quality to it where it just has a lot of flavor and moisture in the middle. Like it's very chewy in the center, super crisp and buttery exterior. I went back and tried the Claire Saffitz cookie, and I think that the Claire cookie is actually like soft, like a soft chewiness, whereas Ambitious Kitchen is a little like crisper on top, and that could be due to my bake time. Like maybe I just over baked it by 1 minute, whereas if you wanted it doughier, you could underbake it by a minute or so. But overall, love the flavor of this cookie. I think it's like very nostalgic to me, especially because it uses chocolate chips, whereas the last 3 cookies use chopped chocolate, which I think gives like a very gourmet, like you get that pool of chocolate on top, which looks really nice. But there's something about chocolate chips where it like helps prevent the cookie from spreading as much, and the sweetness like really adds to the overall flavor of this cookie. So yeah, one of my favorites so far. This recipe is by Cloudy Kitchen. This recipe is actually very similar to Brave Tart's recipe because I know a lot of you were curious to see how her recipe fared. I chose to test Cloudy Kitchen's recipe because her recipe is like more widely available online, and it also doesn't use nutmeg, which I think can be a very divisive subject, and I've had trouble in the past putting like just the right amount of nutmeg into Brave Tart's cookies so that you don't taste it, but it like accentuates the flavor. Cloudy Kitchen is also a great recipe because it doesn't require any chilling, you don't need a mixer, super easy to throw together. Once again, we have a really nice like crisp buttery edge. The middle is like, I would say verges on fudgier rather than chewy. I did go back and retaste Claire and Ambitious Kitchen to see how the chew kind of compares, and I think there's just like so much chocolate in here that it kind of like disrupts the actual dough, but like a very nice like fudgy bite. In contrast, Ambitious Kitchen tastes far more vanilla-y, whereas Claire's tastes a little more like salty caramelized. And what I'm getting the most from this dough is like chocolate, but also like a really buttery melt in your mouth dough. So again, maybe part of the crisp on the bottom could have been to my bake job, but overall, I think this is a great option for like crisp and fudgy. This recipe is by I Am a Food Blog, and this recipe stood out to me because it uses a much higher ratio of flour to butter than any other recipe. I tend to like a really thick kind of cakey cookie, so that caught my eye. It also uses Sarah Kiefer's pan banging method to create more ripples in the cookie, which I didn't quite achieve with this one, but still excited to try it and see how it tastes. So aesthetically, this cookie would be one of my favorites. I think the way it's like a very even thickness looks really appealing. However, there isn't as much textural contrast between like the edges and the middle as there are with some other cookies. And I think the flavor is a little bit lacking, which is what happened to me when I was trying to play around with the Joy the Baker cookie to get that like juicy, buttery, caramelized flavor, but also get a thicker cookie. So by adding more flour, you're kind of like negating the buttery flavor, and so because this cookie has a smaller ratio of butter to flour, I think you're getting that nice thickness and like good texture, but sacrificing on the butter flavor. So overall, I think this cookie felt a little bit flat for me flavor-wise, but if you like a thick cookie, you like big pools of like melty chocolate and like a lot of sea salt on top, this is a great one. This recipe is by Chef Miro Uskokovic. I hope I didn't butcher your name. This cookie is special for many different reasons. So it uses whole eggs plus egg yolks. It uses organic sugar. Chef Miro calls for a European style butter like Kerrygold. It also uses dark milk and white chocolate. He typically uses guittard chunks, but I could only find guittard chips, so that's what I used in this cookie. And then, interestingly, in talking about the development of this recipe, Chef Miro said that they tested a all-purpose flour version and then a gluten-free flour version, and they actually liked the gluten-free flour version better, so that's what they defaulted to using with their famous cookie at Untitled. So this gluten-free flour is specifically the Cup for Cup brand, the regular, like not whole wheat kind, because Chef Miro says that even like the whole wheat versus the regular will give you different results, as will using any other brand of gluten-free flour. Usually gluten-free cookies have kind of like a sandy quality because the flour just like has a little bit of a grittier texture. I can barely get that with this cookie just because I'm looking for it, but if you had this as a standalone cookie, I don't think I would be able to tell it was gluten-free. It's like a little bit doughy in the center, like you kind of get like that fudgy doughy quality. Despite using European butter, I'm not getting like a huge amount of buttery flavor, and I think that's because this cookie also uses a really high ratio of flour to butter versus the other recipes. I did DM Chef Miro and I was like, I'm so sorry, my cookies don't look as beautiful as yours do in the picture. Like, do you know what would have happened and why they're so kind of chunky? And he said because chocolate chips obviously hold their shape, they don't allow the cookie to spread as much as chopped chocolate would. So if you like more spread to these cookies and you're gluten-free, I would give these cookies a try, but definitely try it with like a chopped chocolate bar if you can't find like guitar chunks, which I really couldn't find them. But overall, the flavor of these I think is like very much like a doughy cookie. This recipe is Cooks Illustrated. This is actually the winner of our last chocolate chip cookie bake-off, so it was one of 2 brown butter chocolate chip cookies that we tested. This and Joy the Baker. This recipe is very similar to 2 highly requested other recipes, Sarah Kiefer and Butternut Bakery. It kind of stood out for its like unusual ratio of butter, so it uses 14 tablespoons, whereas most recipes use around 16. And it also uses a really interesting whisk and wait method, so you whisk the dough for 30 seconds, let it sit for 3 minutes, and do that 2 more times to let the sugars incorporate evenly. As a note, this one uses Ghirardelli chocolate chips because Cooks Illustrated says they're the best. So what is actually standing out to me most in this cookie is the chocolate chips. Like there's a really nice like clear bittersweet flavor, which I don't feel like I got as strongly from the Miro cookie. And then of course the texture is really beautiful, like with just an egg yolk, it's like very chewy, crisp edges. Cooks Illustrated said they reduced the amount of flour and reduced the egg white, I think, to bring the brown sugar flavor to the forefront. I still don't think they got quite as much flavor as like Claire Saffitz, but I mean, again, a really nice, like beautifully chewy, I think it's like a thicker cookie than Claire. So overall, would say amazing if you want kind of like a thicker texture, fudgy yet also chewy center, and then a crisp exterior. However, flavor still not as good as Claire. This recipe is by Butternut Bakery. This recipe uses a combination of bread flour and cake flour, which is very similar to the very popular New York Times recipe. The only reason why I didn't test that recipe is because it doesn't use brown butter, so this is kind of like the stand-in alternative. But it's also really interesting in that it uses espresso powder, which none of the other recipes use. Espresso typically tends to bring out more of the chocolate flavor. It also uses a tiny bit of lemon juice, which is supposed to help break down the gluten, giving you a tender yet chewy cookie. I love this cookie. It has that same like juicy, buttery quality with like the really caramelized edges, chewy center. I think the espresso isn't overpowering the way it's been in some other baked goods for me, but it really, I think, elevates like the brown sugar, like caramelized flavor. Again, normally like thicker cookies, but something about like this thin, like fudginess of the center really does it for me. And I would say I would need to taste Claire's side by side. I'm gonna do that. Please cut this out later. Okay, after retasting Claire's cookie, I actually think there is an even more buttery flavor in this cookie. And to be honest, I don't know what magic is happening between the bread flour, the cake flour, the lemon juice, but this texture to me is perfect. Okay, of these 9, which is my personal favorite, I would say that Butternut Bakery definitely stood out to me as one of my tops, and the other 2 that I kept gravitating back towards were Claire Saffitz and Ambitious Kitchen. I think all of these have amazing flavor, a really nice chewy center with a contrasting, like crispy, buttery edge. I would say if you really want like a chocolatey, chocolate forward, very fudgy, rich cookie, Cloudy Kitchen, Buttermilk Pantry. I am a food blog, can't go wrong. Buttermilk by Sam is a really beautiful kind of like crunchier cookie with a fudgy center. And then Chef Miro is gonna give you a really nice like doughy tasting cookie, whereas Cooks Illustrated, I would say like very similar to the top 3, but in my mind, like slightly less flavor somehow, but still good. Thank you so much for watching. For the full data-driven results, you can visit my blog, thepancakeprincess.com. We also filmed a day in the life of what a bake-off in this tiny New York apartment looks like, so go watch that if you haven't. And thanks for watching.